Daycare workers, what is the most shocking family secret you have been told by a kid? Story 1. I dated a girl with 2 kids, and once I was watching them while she went to the doctor. She had a serious medical problem, and she wanted the kids to not be there and see her all stressed out. Was watching a toy store with her 3-year-old daughter. I guess the daughter started understanding that her mom and I are more than friends, and she said, "Would you hit Mama?" I was shocked, and I said, "Of course not. What put that idea in your head?" And she teared up and said, "My daddy used to hit her." And she started crying. I just did my best. I explained to her that I would never hurt any of them and how people who love each other should behave, and that her dad had a sickness that caused him to act strangely. He was an addict. I got her a popsicle, and she calmed down as Buzz Lightyear and Woody was flying into the car. I was aware that their dad hit their mom, but I didn't know if the daughter witnessed it or would even remember. Story 2. When my son was 3, I bought my wife Titanic on video. Yes, it was a long time ago, for her birthday. He asked if he could watch it after nursery school. We said that it wasn't really a film for children. It was a film for grown-ups like Mommy and Daddy. When I picked him up later, his nursery teacher was stifling her laughter as he had been telling everyone all day that it was his mummy's birthday that day and that Daddy had bought Mummy a special video that only mummies and daddies could watch. Story 3. I teach 2-year-olds, and we were asking the kids what their parents' names were just to see if they knew. I asked a little boy, "What's Mommy's name?" He says, "Michelle." Then I asked, "What's Daddy's name?" And he looks confused as if he's trying to figure out the answer, but can't. So I ask, "What does Mommy call Daddy?" Assuming he would say John. Instead, he looked up at me and says, "Big Papa." I couldn't help but bust out laughing. Story 4. I don't know if this counts, but a 3-year-old told me he had belly aches every day because Mommy gave him too much sleep juice. I said, "What's that?" But he didn't know. So I brought it up to her, and she said, like it was all normal and fine, even with a little laugh, "Ah, yeah, sometimes I give him a little too much NyQuil because that little doesn't sleep." And I was like, no child that age should have any NyQuil. She laughed it off and said, "He's been getting it since he was a year old. Nothing bad has happened." And on top of that, the kids always came in smelling of cigarette smoke. Needless to say, CPS was called. Wow, that's so irresponsible of the mother. In my opinion, giving a young child NyQuil just to make them sleep is absolutely not okay. It's concerning that she thinks it's normal and even laughs about it. Some people really just don't deserve to have kids. Story 5. This isn't exactly scandalous, but the shocking things I have heard usually involve abuse. We had a family from Texas move to the daycare I worked at in Illinois. The boy would try and tell us stories, but we could never fully get all the details for it to make sense. It would usually go like this. "Boy, you know who's bad?" Me. "Who is bad?" "Boy, the black man." Me. "Who?" "Boy, the black man is bad. He hurts people." Me. "What man? Why does he hurt people?" "Boy, the black man. He's scary." After a few weeks of this, the boy was the one to always bring the black man topic up. I finally was able to discover that the black man was Darth Vader. Story 6. My son once told his class and teacher that his daddy drinks beer every morning. It was Pepsi, but he didn't know the difference. Reply 1. I swear, every kid under a certain age believed at some point that their parents were going to get in trouble for drinking water, tea, coffee, Coke, or whatever while they drove. The weird thing is, drunk driving commercials play on children's TV networks and radio stations, and I remember getting coloring sheets of, "What do you have against drinking and driving?" as young as kindergarten. But it took forever for an adult to specify to me that they meant don't drink alcohol before operating a vehicle. I remember being terrified that my mom was going to get arrested for drinking Snapple in the car, and when I mentioned don't drink and drive, all she'd tell me is that isn't what it means. It's still very weird to me that we get the don't operate a vehicle intoxicated lesson before we get the alcohol makes you drunk lesson. I'm not even sure what the point of teaching kids don't drink and drive is because kids don't drive. Story 7. Oh my, I can't believe this isn't one of the first ones that popped into my head. There was a little girl and boy, about 3 and 1. They were in foster care and had great foster parents. Well, they would get picked up about once a week by a social worker and taken to their parents for visits. One time when they came back from the first unsupervised visit, the little 1-year-old started breathing really heavily and raspy, and then all of a sudden, barely breathing at all. We think maybe an allergic reaction to something. Of course, we called an ambulance. Then, not even 10 minutes after he's off to the hospital, it happens to the little 3-year-old. But she starts throwing up and then not being able to breathe. So we're all like, what is going on? The owner goes to the hospital with the kids and calls later to let us know what is going on. And it turns out the real parents poisoned both of the kids. They turned out okay. The little boy had a lot more in his system and was in the hospital for a few months. But overall, everything went back to normal. Needless to say, the parents went to prison. Their reason for doing it was because if they couldn't have them, then no one else was raising them, which made no sense because they were fairly close to getting them back. You never know how some parents can be until you work in childcare. Story 8. They tell me everything. If you lie to your daycare worker, your child will spill the beans. I have lots of 3-year-olds struggling with potty training, and every single parent will tell me they're working with the child at home. Your kid will tell me if that's true, or if you're just putting them in a diaper as soon as you get home. The biggest thing I've been told, one little girl mentioned how her grandma tries to breastfeed her. Her grandma picked her up every day from daycare and had her just about all afternoon with her alone. We called parents and cops. An investigation was done, and grandma admitted to holding her like she was nursing, but claimed they were just cuddling. From my conversation with the little one, it sounded like it was definitely going on. She was really detailed for an almost 3-year-old. Grandma walked away unscathed and still picked the little girl up from daycare regularly. The potty training situation is one thing, but the grandma attempting to breastfeed her grandchild is really concerning. I'm surprised that despite the investigation and the child's detailed account, the grandma still continued to pick up the child from daycare. Story 9. Not sure if this counts. A wife runs one. Had a day off from work, and a 6-year-old sits at the table next to me, and we start talking about different fish in the world. His parents were divorced, and they have split custody. He and his sister only come part-time. So I grab my phone, and we look up different tropical fish and whatnot. After a bit, he tells me he only likes his mom and sister, and hates his dad, stepmom, and stepbrother. Talks about how he's gonna light his dad's house on fire with the people he hates still in it. I told his stepmom about it, and when she came to pick him up, he went to therapy for a while. Then his real mom gets a new live-in boyfriend every month or so. Apparently one has given him swirlies a few times, and another was a convicted child molester. The dad reports this to CPS, but they never do anything about it. Reply 1. A dude I work with just had his second kid. His woman's mother is dating a guy she met through her church's program, Jesus for Prisoners or some shit like that. The dude was doing 10 years for child molestation, and grandma doesn't see anything wrong now that he's accepted Jesus into his life. It just boils my blood that people with kids are okay with shit like that. Story 10. I had a 3-year-old come to class with little red circles on his arms, legs, and back after spending the week with his dad. He told me that daddy burns him with his hot, smelly sticks when he is mad. Dad was burning the kid with cigarettes. Definitely got CPS involved. Story 11. Used to work at a daycare, and the cutest little red-headed boy said, "I have to go drain my snake." He told us that's how his uncle announces he has to go to the washroom. That was 25 years ago, and I'll never forget it. Story 12. I worked at a gym childcare center in high school, and a pair of 4-year-old twins, one who appeared to be mentally disabled, with an older sister came in. Not 3-year-olds, but not very old. The little boy had these weird scars all over his arms and legs, like old cut marks healed over. The older girl, maybe 5 or 6, noticed me looking, and calmly explained that it was from when his twin sister had gone after him with a knife, and she rolled up her sleeves to show me the same marks all over her arms. Apparently the younger girl had serious issues, and her parents apologized for not warning me when they came to pick her up. I never saw them again, but it's the creepiest little girl I've ever seen. Yeah, the parents should have informed the gym childcare center about their child's behavior beforehand so that the staff could be prepared to handle any situations that may arise. I hope the family sought professional help to address the issues and ensure the safety and well-being of all their children. Story 13. Not a daycare teacher, but a parent. The little one was about 3.5 when I got a very serious phone call from her daycare to come in and talk about a comment my child had made. Jump in the car and zoom there as quickly as I could, and there was a police car already there. We get into the office to talk about what's happening. My child had told her teacher the marks on her chest and back were from when I beat her. Police officer looks at me and tells me this is very serious, and I'm just about to burst into tears because I can't imagine why my beautiful daughter would say such a thing. Then I remembered what was actually on her chest and back and burst out laughing like a maniac. My daughter had an allergic reaction a couple of days before, and they were still slightly visible even with the cortisone cream and antihistamines we were prescribed by the doctor. Had to explain I never beat my child. She had thought that because she had hives, it meant that she had bees living in her, and by having to take medicine and have a special cream, that I was beeing her to get rid of all the bees. The police officer had a good giggle, and the daycare teacher looked like she had swallowed some lemons when I pointed out that only hours before I had just handed her all the proper documents, doctor's note, description of her allergy plan, etc., along with the bag of cream and medication for the hives. Story 14. 2-year-old girl to my mother, her nursery teacher. My mother says, "You're black." My mother, "Yes, I am." The girl replies, "My mother says she doesn't like black people." My mother is obviously black and a nursery teacher in a country where most other black, African, American, European people are temporary residents only, so most locals have never really interacted directly with black people. Bonus: this little girl is light brown-skinned Arab and apparently was also told by her mother that she is white. Also, I won't go into a debate about the whole Arabs classified as Caucasian or white on censuses in the US thing, but essentially my point was that regardless of if we believe that girl was white or not, her conversation with my mother reflects that she absorbed what her mother told her about race. That's her introduction to race relations, that her mother does not like black people. It was shady on her mother's part at best, and irresponsible and potentially damaging at worst. Story 15. Not daycare, but interning at a school. I was in one class a lot, and there was that one boy who took to me right away. He seemed a bit lonely and socially awkward, and sought out adults rather than other kids. The second day, he told me his mom left him and his dad about a year ago because she didn't want him anymore, and he had just lost his grandma last month, and now he was sad all the time. Another time, he and another kid were lingering around after school was out, and I jokingly asked them if they could not get enough of school. He said no, he'd rather always be in school because at home he was always alone and he hated the weekends. Also, all his dad did was work and complain. If he could, he would want to sleep in school. I really didn't know what to say to that. The kid was super bright and on top of his class, but so sad. I talked to the teachers about him, and they confirmed he had a pretty sad and f***ed up home life. Story 16. I taught the toddlers, but as the day wound down and the number of kids in the building dropped, they would slowly all trickle into one room for playtime and basically wait to be picked up. I was the teacher in charge of the end-of-day playroom as well, and there were two 11-year-old twins who were constantly happy, outgoing, rays of sunshine. But one day, they just weren't, so I asked them if everything was okay. Apparently, over the weekend, their family had gone out to dinner and a movie, which took about 3 or 4 hours. When they returned, their house was a Apparently, their 3 dogs had gotten into a fight, which resulted in one dog dying. The girls walked in on the 2 surviving dogs covered in blood, eating the 3rd dog. Apparently, their parents enrolled them in therapy almost immediately, and it seemed to help a lot. Story 17. I'm putting together a book for my kiddo for when she graduates high school called Texts from Daycare. I have taken screenshots of all the texts I would get throughout the 5 years she was there. Once I was giving her a bath, I think she was about 3, and she wanted to use my body wash, and I must not have rinsed the washcloth well enough when I cleaned her privates. It burned, and I felt so bad. So I texted Daycare, her daycare provider is a friend of mine whom I've known since kindergarten, that night to let her know what happened because I knew she'd say, "Mommy burnt my hoo-ha." The texts I got the next day could only be described as epic. She said something like, "Mommy used her soap on my hoo-ha and it burned and I cried. But I told Mommy I know she didn't mean it, but don't ever use that burn soap again. I watched TV and I stopped crying, but then I cried again because I had hot pee. And Mommy felt really bad, so I said, no more burn soap." If I weren't so close with my daycare provider, that could have ended very badly, possibly with a visit from DCF. Another fun one, the daycare provider was driving and said, apologizes right away, and my kid pipes up from the back seat, "That's okay, my mommy says that word all the time, and she says f to the cat." I do, that cat is an Story 18. Not a daycare worker, but I've done a lot of babysitting. When I was 15, I watched a 7-year-old girl whose mother worked with mine. Mom was a secretary, and the little girl's mom was an APRN. I liked the kid. She was a smart girl, and I liked her mom. Anyway, one day the girl tells me that her mom's name isn't her real name, and that she made it up for work, and it was like having a new mommy. I had no idea what the f that meant, so I tried to ask more questions, but didn't get very far, as I don't think the little girl really had any idea what was actually going on. She did tell me her mom's real name though, so I asked my mom about it, but she didn't know either. She was curious, so she asked a couple of people at work. Turns out the woman I was babysitting for somehow faked everything: her name, identification, degree, and work history. She was not an APRN and she had no degree. Her real name was not the name she had given. It was crazy. Nobody has any idea how she did it, how she managed to fake her way through that job with no goddamn training. The office they worked at was fairly large and well-respected in CT. She was obviously fired, and I no longer had my babysitting job. Wow, it's incredible to think that someone could pull off such an elaborate ruse, faking not just their qualifications, but their entire identity. It's fascinating how the little girl had some inkling about her mom's deception, even if she couldn't fully comprehend the situation. Story 19. So I worked in a day nursery for about 4 or so years, and I will never forget the day a 3-year-old outdated her mom and dad for having a swing in their bedroom by drawing a pretty graphic picture of the swing and her mummy laying back in it, and daddy kneeling down in front of her. We reported it to management because of policies and procedures, but my lord, I had to leave the room and laugh before I imploded. The same child, maybe 3 or 4 days later, pipes up during a conversation about religion. It was around Christmas time, so we were covering what religions have what festivals/gods, etc. She announces that her mummy loves God very much and prays to him a lot at night. Without even thinking, we asked how she prayed. She responded by making smoke and saying, "Oh my God, oh God, oh God, oh God, yes, I am so close," and that she thought it was sweet because she felt so close to God. I miss this kid. Please leave your story down below in the comments. I would absolutely love to make a video about them in the future. And also don't forget to like and subscribe. And until next time, peace.